Jane, do you want to start with roll call?
Yeah, it's 12:03. I'll note that. And Jackie Yenna,
Here.
Paul Ash,
Here.
Mary Morgan,
Here.
Karen St. John,
Here.
Julie Donham,
Here.
and then so far absent are Scott Wright, Kate Rosenbarger, and Tracy Gates will not be joining us today. And I think that's everybody. And then I'm
Alex.
Jane. Oh, sorry, Alex will be here, but it's not yet. And then I'm Jane Cooper Smith staff, and Cheryl Gilliland staff is here as well. Larry Allen is the staff, UEA legal counsel. And then Katz has joined us. So I think that's everybody.
All right. Great. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And Jane, we'll move on to report. Happy New Year, by the way. We'll move on to reports from officers and committees. Go. You want to start with financial reports?
Yeah, so can you all see my report screen okay? Okay, thanks. I sent out a slightly updated report this morning. We had some interest, a small amount of interest to include. So this is the year end for 2021. We ended the year with total current assets of $2,351,766. That includes 3 savings accounts and then our checking activity at First Financial Bank. As usual, this negative amount just reflects the snapshot in that moment. We have a sweep account, so it was going from savings to checking before it went out into the world. In terms of other assets, we've got our notes receivable, which represents a handful of pre-existing zone business loans, and then the majority of those are RRF loans. Sorry, Alex is having trouble getting in. I'm going to stop for just a second. Okay. All right, can you see me again or see the screen again?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, okay. So total notes receivable, $313,068. We're going to expect some of those to come back to us in 2022. Some of those will remain in payment like they already are, and then some of those will enter repayment in June of 2022. Accounts payable, we had discussed, and I think honestly, we may need to clean that up. Still, it reflects, this amount has changed a little bit. It reflected that Ignition Arts amount that I think there was the payable was entered because the contract was negotiated in 2020, and then that contract is not going to be, it's been voided. And then there's an addition of $375 in this accounts payable because that represents our payment to St. John Associates for their DEI training. So Cheryl, I'll get with you separately about that. Equity, total equity is $2,640,959. I think I said that wrong. Total liabilities and equity, $2,664,834. Any questions on the balance sheet?
Jane, did you want to talk a little bit about the system to setting up the notes receivable? Are we too early to talk about that? You mentioned that to me the other day. The system that the city's going to work on,
the grant management?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Maybe I'll talk about that in the director's report after we get through the financials.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, great. Anything else on balance sheet? Okay, in the P&L, total income for 2021 was $539,306. That number, yeah. It includes our RDC payment hits that account and then goes out. So there's a significant payable that comes from that. Expenses. This category represents our grants that we've paid out this year. So, that's a big impact, but it's under what we want to get out into the community. Yeah, insurance expenses, professional fees. Professional services, I'll work to move that. That's a grant. That's not a professional service. So sorry about that. RDC TIF zone participation fee, that's that pass-through funding enterprise zone and deductions that are in the TIF, pay a percentage to the RDC and we receive that on their behalf and then pass it along. Additional scholarship funding that went out, 6,318 in business scholarships, 675 in DEI training scholarships, 3,000 in resident scholarships. This business scholarship and resident scholarship number are low. We got people committed to the programs for the full amount, but what they submitted for reimbursement, they're just in the reimbursement process. And so we didn't pay out the full 2020 amount. So I think for resident scholarships, that's a $9,000 amount. So, we'll just honor those scholarships for, we'll pay them out in 2022 according to our commitments, but we'll issue our full budgeted amount for 2022. Special projects, Lemonade Day. So total expenses, $254,499. Net ordinary income, $284,806. And then we have additional interest income included for a total net income of $286,181. Any questions here?
So Jane,
Go ahead, Mary.
you might have already talked about this. How much funds do we have that are currently unencumbered? Do you know?
Oh, well, I mean, we're hitting reset at the end of the year. So basically, and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I'm looking at this net assets less our 2022 budget. I mean, I guess the 2022 budget is kind of what we're earmarking. So I guess we could call that encumbered. Is that how you would answer that question, Karen?
Do we have any grants that we committed to that we haven't paid out yet?
Well, yeah, so that's like,
Payables, the 25, is that what that is under payables?
sorry, I'm just looking for
Or
it.
23,875? Are those-
So, no, the 23 is a canceled contract that needs to disappear.
Okay, so,
The 23.5, and so then 375 was entered
Yeah.
in December.
yeah.
And
So,
then there's $6,000 in scholarship funding that we committed in 2021 that we'll pay out. But the scholarship program always lags
yeah,
across the next year. So I don't know how you want to look
but
at
we
that.
don't really have, yeah, I mean, we don't have anything that we can budget, but I wouldn't really necessarily call it encumbered because we don't have a person or an organization that it is committed to. It's just a plan to spend it, which is what the budget is.
Yeah, except for that 6,000, which is earmarked for
Yeah.
specific individuals.
Yeah,
And then the other way I would answer that, Mary, is that we used to have more, we used to have a carryover column from the previous year in our annual budgeting document. And then the board wanted to see that kind of go away. They wanted that, that was maybe before I started. They wanted that cleaned up because it was getting confusing. We were carrying over from 1 year and then sometimes 2 years. And so I think that's that's how we've been handling it, is sort of like what our discussion last month with the budget was, how we wanted to have a clean break at the start of the new year. So with the arts grant that was unspent in 2021, for example, we're not listing that as a carryover. We just brought that into the new budget so that we can look pretty squarely at the 2022 budget and know what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I just have a follow-up to that question. A couple things I'm wondering about is that on our budget, as proposed, not approved, it basically is pretty much a break-even budget. I mean, it goes over by 17,000, but compared to 2.66 million, it's really not a lot. So my one question is, does the board want to consider, and Jane, this really would start with you, like planning to spend more money? Followed by my next question or comment is, how much are we comfortable holding back and sitting on? And I don't mean sitting on to be negative, but like how much of our assets do we want to try and spend and activate? And my last question is, so it's all related to planning, is when we look at the fact that last year we took in $539,000 and spent half of that, what will we project for 5 years? Like an exercise to project for 5 years, knowing that our EZIDs go up and down and people come in and they age out, what that would look like over a 5-year period. Ideally it could be longer if we wanted to, but to really get a sense of what we're looking at in terms of money coming in, money going out over a 5-year period, knowing that we have the asset level that we have. So it's really like a financial projection and planning so that the board can then say, wow, a budget of $331,000 is way more than we want to spend given how the next 5 years is going to look, or wow, that's just not enough. We're sitting on too much money. So, which is a different kind of way of thinking than when you run a business. Sitting on money in a business can be like a very good thing, but in a nonprofit, it's not such a great thing all the time. So.
Yeah, Julie, do you want to jump in first, or do you?
Sure. Well, so, and another thing that we have out there is that Jane feels fairly sure that we're going to get the Catalent EZID, which is going to bring us an additional 200,000 a year, roughly, Jane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to have, so I actually mentioned that to Jane the other day, is do we need to increase, we need to find a project that makes sense probably to spend some more money. I totally agree with you. I do think we ought to not spend everything, because we have years like the year that we really didn't get any EZID income, that when we were going to go out of existence. So we want to make sure that we have in case we have a year where businesses need extra help, that we've got money held back, I think, to do some of that in those years when our state funding kind of rolled off there for a period of time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that is just a very prudent thing to do to keep the organization going. And I think we all agree, we just need a plan. We need something that we can stand on and stand behind and say, this is our plan. This much is held back for the continuation of the BUEA. This much is earmarked for some big project that is yet unnamed at this potential level, or whatever, however you want to talk about that sort of money. And then, because if we just keep going on this whole scholarship thing and grant, we're just going to keep accumulating money.
Yeah, and I think we can have an exponential impact with some planning. So when Julie and I talked about this the other day, we sort of felt like working on a survey this year to get a up to the minute kind of understanding of what zone business needs are. And then I'm happy to kind of pitch a way to approach the planning before I do a lot of research, I think. And it could also be useful for the board. Maybe at our next meeting, we could revisit some of the foundational documents for the enterprise zones so that we can refamiliarize ourselves with what the original intent of this available funding was meant for, so that when we look forward, we can kind of try to strategize to get the money to overlap what its original purpose is and what our direct community needs are right now. Because I think there's a lot that we need in the zone. While it's changed a lot since 1993, especially now with the troubles that a lot of people are facing with substance use disorder and experiencing a lack of housing, I think there's a lot of good that we could do for the enterprise zone. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that off the cuff?
I would just say that Karen expressed very eloquently what I was trying to get at, which is that it seems as though we're not spending the money that we have available. And I completely agree with Julie and Karen and you in terms of longer term planning.
Well, and something that isn't small, notice the legacy hospital site is within the zone, and we have no idea what's going to happen there.
Right.
Paul, I would argue we do kind of know. I mean, we have a pretty great master plan, and I think maybe there's a lack of visibility outside, Alex, is what I could hear with Paul's observation, but we could do a presentation on that too, honestly.
Last night, we learned that things that we thought were going to be demolished before the city got a hold of the property, now it turns out that, I mean, maybe other people knew this all along, but I didn't know that an awful lot of that stuff will not be demolished yet. It'll be the core site that IU Health is going to have leveled, except for the core building and the parking garage. But a lot of the property around there, like the laundry and what have you, Bloomington Convalescent Center is not a small building, that will not be demolished. So, we in fact have some surprises.
Would the board be interested in having, I don't know, 10, 15-minute presentation on the hospital site at one of our meetings, given that it's located in the zone?
I think it might be good.
Okay.
I'm becoming fairly well informed now. So, that it depends on what others want.
No, let's do it. I think that would be a great complement to thinking about some strategic planning for our spending. I think it's a good suggestion. Okay. So my kind of notes from that are thinking about, what we're doing long-term, some business outreach, communicating with the board about the hospital site. And then, sorry, before the meeting started, someone had also inquired about the status of CDFI Friendly Bloomington, which of course was our last major investment. We invested $1 million and then $75,000 in that project, and they're doing great. And so I know Brian Payne would love to come talk to us about what their current projects are. So I think that I'll look at the next meeting, but maybe it will be a good time to do some of this, have people report back to us. Anything else? Oh,
yeah. So going back to the comments I had about, which are separate from the ones you just mentioned, about doing some kind of 5-year financial plan, or at least projection of, the best you can do of where this could go. And I'm not suggesting that we put on hold again the budget for 2022. We could actually change the budget later if the projections come back and we feel like the budget was not reflective of what we anticipate. So I don't mean to say that my comments are like, we can't approve this budget, but I do think that does need to get done on the sooner end rather than the later end, because it's really important to know what we're looking at, so we can spend and activate money. Yep.
I think that's totally doable. And I had to start with those 5-year income projections. And so we can add to that some expenditures. And do you want to see that, Karen, like as the full budget document, just with 5 years instead of 3 years, or do you want to see summaries?
I think you could just do a summary if that's an easier start. And then if just to get it done, I
Yeah.
think the value of having it done is higher than the value of having all the detail of it, because we have the 2022 detail. And if you were just to put, and this is just my opinion, a number for administrative budget and a number for grant making budget, then we can look at those buckets. And then once it's done, we could go back later and make it a more robust document.
Okay.
And that's what I think. I don't know if other people agree with that or not, but that's where I'd start.
So Karen, I may reach out to you for some proofreading if you're
Sure. Yep.
for that. Okay, great. Thanks. And I'll jump back to my screen share if that's okay with everybody. Okay. So we went through the P&L, and then this is just a reset of the 2022 commitments. So as I mentioned, we had the DEI scholarships were one of the categories where we had a lot of interest in 2021. We had fewer organizations, I think because the program was so new, fewer organizations were ready to implement and turn in their expenses, their receipts. So we have $6,250 worth of applications from 2021 that will just roll over into 2022. And we're in active communication with those businesses to help them. They're exploring programs. They're, some of them are in the process of providing receipts. So they're at different phases of executing those reimbursements, but they're live. And, for a new program without a lot of runway, I think we have a lot of interest. And so I'm optimistic for what we can do in 2022. And that's really all that we have committed so far. And then that's the budget document. I guess I'll stop sharing. There was just really a couple items on my director's report. Well, really one main item. I wanted to report that we are in the process of onboarding both economic and sustainable development and the BUEA with new grant management software, which I think will be really great for grant and scholarship applicants and for staff. So it'll be, a contained system, a link or a page on the website run by a third party where, individuals can apply. We can track data and status and provide reports a lot more easily and track applicants across programs. So we're really excited about it. We've been talking about it since I started, or even before Alex. I think that was a project when Brian was on board. And so we've had one onboarding session and have another one this afternoon. And we'll have 3 sample programs, hopefully within 6 weeks. One of the 3 will be a BUEA program. I think we're starting out with a business scholarship. And then once that's live, I'll be able to add our other programs in there. So I think one of the multiple advantages to this, but what it means for us practically in 2022 is that we'll be able to have everything on cycles, which will give us a better ability to promote the programs. In the past, we've kind of received applications on a rolling basis, and that just hasn't contributed to a lot of energy around what we're doing. And so with this, it'll be more like the way Holly and Sean have run the VAC programs, where there will be an announcement, the applications are open, we'll review them, we'll announce them, and then they'll go off into the world and do whatever their programs are. So I think there's a lot of good there. It seems like one little shift, but I think it's going to impact all of our programming.
One of the things that when I mentioned it when we were going through the balance sheet is you were going to follow up with some of those recipients to see if they were going to pay them back as opposed to unloading them on the grant system, right?
Well,
Am I
guess
talking?
maybe there's 2 different things. So the other big 2022 phenomenon is going to be, so that was the grant and scholarship program. And then for our COVID response, our rapid response loans, those will enter repayment, and we will have a third-party loan servicer that will be a CDFI likely. And so, yeah, what Julie is talking about is that there's a cost to onboarding borrowers to the loan servicing company. And so we want to make sure that we're communicating with borrowers in advance so that if they think they're repaying or they're planning to repay, we want to make sure that that happens before we have the expenditure of onboarding them. Is that what you were talking about, Julie?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be kind of the other big project for us for 2022. So I think that, again, should probably take a little bit of work up front, and then hopefully will be pretty self-sufficient after the fact. And we can pay them to handle collections on our behalf too, which I think would be a wise investment. It's an add-on. It's not a de facto included cost, but if one needed to go, if a company were missing payments, then we could pay the CDFI to handle that on our behalf. So we would never have to get bogged down. But I'll have more details about that later.
Those are both good programs, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and to the point of the previous discussion, when those loans come back to us, that was the $313,000. I guess it's listed as an asset, so we were already counting that.
Right.
Okay, well, I think that's about it for my director's report. We've been short-staffed in ESD. We're hiring a temporary administrative assistant that will help, I think, with some of the BUEA activities. And then I haven't given up on getting a marketing assistant for intern, which you guys approved last fall, and it's been sort of confusing from an administrative perspective how to actually do that through the city HR. But Alex, it's on my to-do list to follow up with you this week about that. So, okay. Any questions about those items? All right, Julie.
Do we want to address the budget now, or do you want to save it until?
That's up to you. We have the election of officers as new business and then budget as unfinished.
Okay, that's fine. So we can move on to the election of officers. We just talked about this as the first meeting of the year, so we probably do need to elect officers again. We have some people that are willing to continue in their officer positions. I've said I will. Karen, I think you will. Mary, I think you've said you will. Jane, have you heard from anybody else?
Not of interest, but I just communicated with you and Mary, and then I think you communicated with Karen.
Yeah. But if somebody else wants to do my position, I'm more than willing to step aside and let somebody do it. And I would imagine that Karen and Mary feel the same way. I don't know, but are there any since we don't really have a slate? I said this is going to be a little messy, but are there any nominations from the floor for officer positions, or should we go position by position, or?
I'm in favor of retaining all the officers that are willing to serve.
Okay.
I'd
They're all
second
doing a
that.
fantastic job, so.
I'd second that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any input? We've got other people on here.
We're missing Scott and Tracy and Kate. So this is something that I think we could do without them, but also if any of them are interested, we wouldn't know.
Right. So this is not something we really have to do this meeting, but we should do it very soon, I think. Do you think we ought to hold it off, or what do you think we ought to do?
Here's Larry. What does Larry think?
I was going to say, under the bylaws, technically, you elect officers for a 2-year term.
Oh, we do?
And so there was an election. You could hold an election at any time, but whenever you do hold an election, it is required to be held the first meeting of the calendar year.
Okay.
That you meet. So we elected officers last in 2020 was the last time. So
Oh, so we
if
need
we
to do
want
it.
to do another election, we can certainly hold that to the next meeting since you're still in the middle of your term. That can be done at any time.
Okay,
But the next mandatory election would be 2020.
no, 2022.
Well, 2021 is the last time we did it. So 2023 would be the next time. mandatory.
Oh,
Okay.
we did have an election in 2021?
Yeah, I said 2020, but that's because my brain thinks it's still 2021. So I apologize.
All right. So I guess we don't, Jane, then I guess we don't have to have election.
Okay. I hear gratitude on the part of the board for our officers, so I'll just reiterate that from myself too. We do appreciate all that you do to keep us running.
So, okay, I was not aware that we didn't have to do it every year. I'm sorry about that. So do we want to move on to unfinished business?
Let's do it. Okay, here I'm scrolling down to the budget. So we talked about this in great deal at our last meeting, which I think, again, was just a really useful conversation, kind of along the lines of projecting our budget for 5 years. I think we are on a process of continually refining how we do business in the BUEA, and this is part of that. So the board had asked me to include an EZID income projection that's based on existing EZIDs, so that we're looking at what we think is really reliably going to come in. So this means we're not looking at EZIDs that haven't been approved or filed yet. So that's what this 262,867 is. The EZID loan interest fee, I just stole that from 2021 because it's been up and down over the years. And I think it's realistic based, looking back. So I just left that as is. The loan interest income goes up because, again, we'll have those RRF loans, which are significant. Those will enter repayment. So we'll see some income there. And then the refunded AIEZ fee, I lowered a little bit just because it's a percentage of our EZID income. So, well, I'm sorry, the fee that we pay to the AIEZ is a single percentage of our EZID income, and then they refund what they don't need. So they don't hang on to operating funding that they know they're not going to use. So the refund amount, there are a variety of variables impacting that. But I think this is conservative and realistic. And then earned interest is from our bank accounts. And yeah, again, I think 2020, we would have paid out that big payment to CDFI friendly Bloomington. So that's why it was high there. And then net assets have increased over time. So again, I think that's reasonable. And then the other change from the last time we visited this budget, we had the discussion about the zone arts grant. So in 2021, for a variety of reasons, that 40,000 did not get out into the community. But with the help of our new grant management software, our great new director for the arts, and then our strategy of going out into the community and promoting BUEA programming together, we feel confident that we're going to get new participants in our arts grants and that we're going to be able to get this money out. So the board didn't formally approve rolling that money forward one way or another, but they said in order to consider it, we need to see it reflected in the budget. So it's now reflected in the budget and up for formal discussion. And then nothing else has changed, but of course that does impact our net income. So as Karin mentioned earlier, we have a net income of negative $17,057, which for the size of our our assets, that's basically break even.
Right.
And it's likely that we'll see more income next year anyway, but again, we're going on what we know. So I'd be happy to take questions about any parts of the budget or to zoom in on anything if that's desired.
No, I think you made the changes that we discussed at our last meeting.
Jane, just maybe, and for the group, we're tracking the personal property legislation a little bit in, at least as it's being considered at the State House. Maybe as part of the other exercise of forecasting things out, we should maybe think about differentiating the real versus personal income to the BUE, so that we can evaluate the risk associated with any change in that legislation.
Yeah, that's very doable. Anything else?
I have a quick question about the school grants. Actually, I probably just could have answered it myself. Okay, so we did spend 35,000 last year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, they applied for slightly more and then the board elected to hold at their budget at 35.
okay.
I was talking about that though, when they talked about having that van and wrapping it and stuff like that, we asked them to come back to us with something on that and they never did. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember. But they did.
They do their report when they come ask for more money. I have seen our name is on, BUEA is on the whatever you want to call it.
The van,
mobile.
yeah.
It's big.
I haven't seen it, I guess.
I wonder
Yeah,
if that's,
a bunch.
I think that was a 2020. I think we paid that in 2020 or 29. I think I was a board member when we approved that. And then I went to the launch as a staff member. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So do you think you will actually be able to activate $80,000 in zone art grants?
Well, we're going to do our best. And yeah, Holly, you want to tackle?
Hey, I can speak to that. I think it's a good question, Corinne, and it's something I grapple with a lot. But I think again, I'm meeting with the BAC's new grant subcommittee chair and the commissioner chair of the BAC this weekend to discuss new strategies for getting the word out. I'm also working with other arts organizations in the community just to make sure that we can do a better job of marketing these grants and making sure that they're going to be, that the new individuals who really need these funds are getting them. Now with the increase of Omicron, again, as I'm speaking to members of performance arts organizations, they're again having to shut down performances. So there is going to be a real need for this money going into the new year. And so I think with all of those factors and now hearing that maybe there's potential for the BUA maybe to have some communications help, and knowing that's really goal for my first quarter here at the city is really finding how we can do a better job strategically overall with our communications. I'm confident we can get that ABK out the door. That's a high goal for this year for me.
Yeah, it's a big change from what we've done even pre-COVID. So,
sure.
yeah.
And we've had a hard time sometimes getting 40,000 spent, so.
Yeah, and so I guess if the need is there, I'm in favor of it, but I wouldn't want to be, and you're not suggesting this, Holly, so please don't think that I'm saying that, but I wouldn't want the bar to be lowered on what we considered a valuable arts grant, just because we feel like we have to spend 80 because we didn't spend any last year. Because that's a lot of work to activate effectively $80,000 on small grants. So maybe there's some bigger project you can find out there that would be really impactful that could really benefit from a chunk of that 80.
Yeah, I mean, if you're open to us being allowed to use funds for that purpose, that is something that we're going to also be exploring this year, is just finding out how else we can be using funds, both to support arts groups being able to use spaces at discounted rates. So again, those groups that might not necessarily be able to afford going into spaces, and finding other opportunities to get emerging artists and artists who just don't feel like they presently deserve a seat at the table or deserve to be able to ask for funds. We're looking for new ways to give them larger chunks of money. So if that's something you would be interested in supporting, I would be super grateful, and I'd be happy to report back some real strategies on what kind of work we could do in that area in the coming months.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another thing that occurs to me, you know, Monroe County Public Libraries, for example, is a way to kind of improve the access to the library and its services, has done away with fines, which seemed like a really drastic move because that's, you know, a significant revenue generator for them. But they, you know, had a philosophical discussion about what it means to fine patrons. And so they came to this place where they've abolished fines for the most part. And I know that we've structured our grants, our arts grants, as matching grants since I've been here, and maybe the entirety of the zone. But I mean, maybe considering something like that could be interesting. Like we know arts organizations were hurt by the pandemic. We know that they want to be, you know, doing more. We know that they're coming off a couple of years of low revenue. So maybe, Holly, the thing to do is also just think about how our programs are structured, not just like to whom we're marketing them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's something, to your point about matching funds, that's something, we do have a new grants category that does not require a matching fund. So thinking about other ways to release barriers, I think that's one of them that we'll continue to pursue.
So Karin, but your question is for this discussion, it's more about the dollar amount that's on that budget.
Yeah, and just, yeah, I mean, it's clear we put 80 because we didn't spend 40 last year. So the default was, well, let's just double it for this year. I'm just not sure that that's, well, sounding logical, I'm not sure it's the most practical. I'm not opposed to having 80 on there. I just think it's, you know, it's like, yeah, let's make it 80 because we didn't spend it, but we really don't have like, we're going to need like a good plan for that, so that, I mean, at the end of the day, if we don't spend it, it's not any particularly bad thing happens, other than we're in a position again of like not activating dollars that we have. And so as much as Holly can do that, and again, the balance between trying to activate that money and trying to do it in a way that changes the standard by which we've previously done it, there's like that balance between those two. So I'm in favor of it. Arts really clearly have a lot of benefit for the zone and really the larger community. Let's be clear about that. So, but just kind of looking at all of this, I just wonder if there isn't anything else we could be doing beyond the education, and scholarships are really tough. And then there's the arts program, like what else that might be. But that's a really just maybe a conversation for later, like a non-board meeting sort of, you know, work session on like dreaming about what we could do with some of our money.
And it might be helpful after Jane runs this survey, kind of to see what zone residents are kind of looking for, what their needs are.
Yeah.
To develop.
And zone business, right? You were going to do
zone business, yeah.
Yeah. So that was it for me.
You know, the one thing about having that 80,000 there, we always approve those grants also. So there's kind of a second level of approval. It's not just, you know, we're going to fund 80,000, I don't think.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. And I wasn't really trying to insinuate that. It's more like, this is kind of a job for Holly. This is going to be work. I mean, I've been on the professional side of trying to activate grant money. It's really hard to give away money in a way that like is effective. So I just was trying to sort of make that comment that, you know, but I think it sounds like you're up to the task and have some ideas already, working with Jane, of course, and Alex. So it'll be exciting to see what you come up with.
Yeah, and maybe Holly, for us, I think as we build a plan, maybe if we think that target needs to move, to Karen's earlier point, we can request a change to the budget, because it doesn't feel good at the end of the year to have targeted funds that we don't succeed in getting out the door. It just feels like we're not doing our mission, and I don't think we want to wind up in that place.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think that's totally fair to do.
We should also remember, I think, for everybody's benefit, that this is, the BUEA arts grants are in the context of other arts grants that occur. And for example, I think there was a reorganization of doing a first quarter, third quarter kind of play. So you had sort of bookends. So you had, formalized 2 opportunities during the course of the year. So, another option might be to use some of the excess above the 40 to try to augment the opposite year, the opposite grant making in the year. And in 2022, I feel like, fingers crossed, but if in fact we start to ever get out of this pandemic, we have been pretty focused over the last couple of years on operating grants, because frankly, people just can't do programming anything, right? And so it could be that there was an opportunity, and Holly, we could talk about this some more, but it could be that, maybe part of it is more operating, and that's during this period where people are kind of not able to do programming as much. And then hopefully if we can kind of calm things down through the summer, you might have a totally separate effort on more of a programming approach in the second part of the year that allows people to fire up some programming that they haven't been able to do for the first half of the year.
I think that's a good point, Alex. And I can share that one of the reasons why we weren't able to give away as many of the funds we were hoping to be able to in 2021 is because the time period in which organizations are eligible to apply for operational funds is very long. So for example, like organizations couldn't apply for more operational funds if they had already received them in the past 2 years. So unfortunately, that just immediately shut out some of the larger organizations who would have been able to apply for more operational funds. They just couldn't apply at all. So one thing I really want to suggest with the grants committee going forward is that we shorten that period of time that organizations aren't allowed to reapply for operational funds. And again, I think that is, with Omicron numbers going up, like you said, Alex, I think that is going to be a really big focus and a really big need that arts organizations are going to have in the community for the first few months, at least, of the year.
Anything else on that, or any other questions or comments relating to the proposed 2022 budget?
Do we need a motion to approve the budget?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, second,
Second,
Jane, do you want to do a roll call?
I do. Jackie Yenna,
Yes.
Paul Ash,
yes.
Mary Morgan,
Yes,
Karen St. John,
Yes.
Julie Donham,
Yes.
Alex Crowley.
Yes.
I think that's everybody.
Yeah, I don't think we approved the financial reports either.
Oh, right.
So do we want to, can I have a motion to approve the financial reports too?
So moved.
I'm going to give
Second.
that one to Paul.
Second,
Do we want to do that with Jane? I think you'd called out there was a categorization of a
The
certain line.
payable, yeah, with the correction of the $2,500 payable. And Cheryl,
Okay.
I'll contact you about that.
25,000,
Yeah,
right?
25,000.
Yeah.
Or 25.5 actually. 23.5. I'll get it one day. Correction of the $23,500 payable. So was that a Paul?
Was a first. Do we have a second? Or Alex, were you a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Jane, you-
And
Jane,
yeah,
did you also get the correction on the professional services, 45,000 SBDC? On the,
right, that needs to be moved.
yeah,
Okay.
on the income statement to, I think you said to grants.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so there's two corrections, I
Two
guess.
corrections. Okay. So then for the roll call, Jackie Enna,
Yes.
Paul Ash,
Yes,
Mary Morgan,
Yes,
Karen St. John,
Yes.
Julie Donham,
Yes.
Alex Crowley.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks for your work on the budget, Jane. That was, I think we had a really good discussion at the last meeting about it, and I think you incorporated the changes very well,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, me too. Or I mean, I appreciated the discussion. I think it helps us get the budget into a really good place.
And everybody I think we do all need to think of ways that we can put our money at the BUEA to work, because we do have a lot of assets. And coupled with the fact that we're going to get this, we feel fairly sure we'll get this Catalent. So it will make our funding quite a bit higher. So we need to think about that and see ways that we can increase to offset our funding even for the 2022 year. So that's everybody's homework.
Well, I think we used to several years ago do that kind of modeling that Karen was suggesting. And, I just remembering back, you've got the knowns, that's the current,
Right.
that's already happening, particularly in the real estate, the real property. You've got the known unknowns. And what I would categorize in that is like the personal property, the effect on personal property income. Then you've got the unknowns, and you totally have to guess. And you can look back over the years and say, what dropped out of the sky of any scale, and try to bake that in, right, as you forecast it forward. Once you've done all that and you can do that forecast, it becomes kind of fundamentally a question of, because the other thing that happens is at some point, the enterprise zone goes away, right? So
Right.
that has a tail, but you have no more incremental income coming in. And then you
it
have
doesn't go away anymore.
okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
So then what happens is it's all about duration, right? And it's all about how long do you want to keep this thing humming along, and that's the natural tension, really. So that's a good conversation to have with the board at some point. But I think Karen, to your point, based on the model, because that'll give us a sense of what the future might look like.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. And I think at one point I did look at some other urban enterprise, because I was just kind of curious. And I know I looked at Evansville, and they do like some things that we don't do around beautification, making the zone look better. And they do all sorts of things. There's like landscape things they do, and painting of homes in the zone that need it, and all sorts of things. Now, I don't know what their budget is, but programmatically, I do remember they had some things they did there that we don't talk about doing. So that might be a way to do this too, to Julie's point, for us to do some homework and bring some of that forward.
And I do have an AIEZ meeting on Friday, so I'm happy to ask kind of general questions about their, the other zones programming. This is great. The last two, Julie, if it's okay, the last two unfinished business items, I sort of talked about the intern already, and then the board vacancy just continues on. So I was sort of wondering if it's a council appointment, and I was sort of wondering if they would be dialed into that. I think those appointments went out at the last meeting. Have they been done already, Alex or Larry? Council appointments to boards and commissions?
No, I don't think so. I think they were trying to sort of get the new committees figured out, and then they were going to go to that. So I think
they might take it up tonight. It
Yeah.
sounded like maybe.
Okay. Well, anyway, they're aware of it. I've communicated, but there were no big names.
Are you talking about the council representative to the BUEA? Or are you talking about the open position that the council?
yeah, the open position that the council
Okay.
appoints.
I think tonight is just the council appointments to various boards and commissions. So,
Okay,
which would be relevant. But
Yeah.
my guess is that they would await a recommendation from us for somebody who might be interested versus being proactive, but I haven't talked to anybody about that recently.
well, it's hard. I hear a lot of feedback. I sent this email out about the employee or the employee deduction, where if an employee lives and works in the enterprise zone, they're eligible for a deduction. And I heard back from a lot of employers that, we check on this, but we just don't have anybody. A lot of our employees all work out of town. Like, I think there's just a huge amount of people commuting into the enterprise zone that aren't eligible. And I guess I think that translates because, maybe zone residents fall into a few different categories, and maybe it's trickier to recruit that minority political or alternate political person. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have. And then Julia, do you want to get us through the last item as general discussion?
Yeah,
We've had a lot of.
is there any general discussion? Again, I think everybody needs to kind of think about ways or programs and stuff, and we'll have, I think it'll be something that we'll talk about probably at every meeting, but we may need to have a session, Jane, on that at some point in time.
Yeah.
So, we had $1 million ask, obviously, which we did, which would have been way outside of our budget. And we may have things like that from time to time, but we probably do need to put more of our assets to work. So anyway, does anybody else have anything for the good of the board? Well, hearing nothing, our next meeting is February 9th. And I assume we'll still be on Zoom?
I assume so.
I assume so too, with everything that's going on right now. I feel more comfortable with it. I don't know how everybody else feels, so. But anyway, thank you all for your commitment to the board and for all the things that you do, and we will see you in February.